Hey, everybody. Let's talk about the blue zones. So, the blue zones are these areas all across the globe that have the longest lifespans. And the way it's presented a lot of times is, the documentary on Netflix, it's wonderful. Watch it. It's a docu series. Um, and it lived to 100. So, the whole premise of the blue zones diet, we'll get into that in just a second, is that it's a longevity diet. It helps you live for a very, very long time. And these are the 5 currently recognized blue zones, with the 6th potential new addition, which is Singapore. So, Okinawa, Japan, Ikaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Nicoya, it's a little peninsula in Costa Rica, and then Loma Linda in California. And these places have a higher than usual number of people that live longer than the average. And people started to wonder why. And it's not just diet. So even though it's presented as the Blue Zones diet, it's a lifestyle. And the word diet oftentimes gives people this big ick factor because it's been overused and misused and misappropriated and turned into this thing where it's restrictive eating, where you don't get to enjoy food or experience anything good. For a lot of people, not all the time. But for a lot of people, that's what the word diet holds in meaning for them. And when we approach it in that way, the benefits are not going to be as high because our biochemistry is working against what we're working toward based on the feelings that we have, the anxiety that we have. So if you are a chronic dieter, and you're trying to move away from that, don't be off put by people calling it the Blue Zones diet. It's not really a diet. It's more it's more reinforming us about an overall health and well-being picture that includes more than move more and eat less, which is trash advice anyway. Just blanket statement trash advice. There's so much more to it, way more nuance. And the Blue Zones actually get into some of the nuance. So as you can see, it's not just about the food that you eat. It's about the lifestyle that you live. You find your purpose, you learn how to rest, you don't overindulge, you focus on plant foods or natural foods, whole foods, clean foods, however you want to call it, because all of those words I have heard people tell me why they are wrong to say, and I've had people tell me why they are right to say. So I like to go for just the scientific definition: nutrient dense foods that have not been ultra processed, which is a mouthful. So I oftentimes will replace that with clean foods just because they are clean and free of any extra crap that we could add in, um, and process it with. And that's a lot of what the Blue Zones mindset focuses on, is a plant-based structure, a plant-based outline, a plant-based foundation for your nutritional habits. Wine in several of the areas, wine with friends, wine for antioxidant purposes, wine for joy, wine because it pairs nicely with a meal. This isn't this isn't an end-all be-all restrictive excuse me restrictive list. It's just guidelines. It says it right there. They're just guidelines. And there's food guidelines, but there's also guidelines for finding the right people and keeping your life centered around love for yourself, love for community, belonging in that community, finding your place within it, being accepted as part of it, and moving naturally. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to join a 24/7 CrossFit gym and work out 3 times a day to be healthy. There are so many different ways that we can approach health and well-being, and the Blue Zones actually lean on that quite a lot, because it's not just about the diet. It's not just about the food. And in some of the literature that I pulled up to read to make sure that I hadn't missed anything when talking about this is at first it was talking about how people really need to calm down with this whole diet piece of it, because people are extracting the diet from everything else and then assigning rules to it that were never intended to be rules to begin with. And so we end up pulling out the diet, and then people not having the same health results because we've extracted one little piece and we haven't looked at the rest of their lifestyle. So that one came out in 2022, just talking about like, all right, like Blue Zone's diet, cool, but like it's so much more than that. It's more than just a long life. It's also a happy one and a healthy one. So there are psychological benefits to not only living in these blue zones and eating in the way that people in these blue zones eat, it's existing in harmony with all of these things that are important, like community, your environment, eating whole foods, eating foods that bring you joy with people that you enjoy spending time with. There's so much more than just counting calories and calculating macros. And a lot of that comes in our mental and emotional, psychological health and well-being, and just kind of how we interact and how we feel in general. Because what happens is we put nutrient-dense stuff, foods, into our bodies. Our bodies are like, oh, cool, we get all this good stuff. Now I can do this with this, and this goes over here, and this goes here. And our bodies start assigning all of these nutrients to these different places where they need to be to keep our biochemistry, our hormones, all of our chemicals, all of our natural processes and biological functions moving in the rhythms in which they move. And what that allows us to do is we have the right chemicals and the right hormones and in the right amounts in the right places, and they keep intersecting and they keep doing their jobs, right? And this obviously depends on each individual person and, you know, what their nutritional needs are and their other health concerns are. But the idea behind eating predominantly plant-based foods in these types of environments is that it's not just about making it to that 104 years old, 90 years old, 87 years, whatever your goal is, however long you want to live, because oftentimes this is presented as a diet that helps you live a long time. But that's incredibly reductive because it's not just making it to 100 years old or however. It's about the experience along your journey there, right? Who wants to live to 104 if they're miserable, right? So we always talk about the diet piece and the end results of living to a certain number, but we don't talk about the benefits that come for us psychologically, emotionally, mentally, environmentally, socioculturally, independently, creatively, physically, nutritionally. We don't talk about what it is to get to that number. And the whole process of getting to that longevity number is part of the benefit, because this article calls it an optimal state of health and long-lasting functional and physical capacity. Basically, you feel better, you live longer, therefore your living longer is not a miserable experience, and it's not just something to check off like off of a list. You enjoy doing it. Part of it is the experience of it. And this talks about what I mentioned a little bit earlier about the ultra processing. We know that ultra processed foods can contribute to chronic disease and metabolic syndrome and other conditions. They also can kind of make us feel bad. Like it just kind of feels gross when our bodies don't have the right fuel to run on. And part of the big focus on the plant-based nutrition side of it is getting enough polyphenols. And polyphenols are a chemical that are found in plants that help our bodies out tremendously by providing lots of antioxidants and decreasing oxidative stress. It increases telomere size and activity, contributes to beneficial epigenetic changes, improves and increases stem cell function and tissue regeneration, and it's also anti-inflammatory. And all of those things, it's a really long, like I could explain how each of those work, and maybe I'll do a different video of each of those. But for this video, the polyphenols benefit our bodies in ways that we don't often talk about needing to be a benefit. We don't often talk about how nutrition oftentimes serves as a function or a mechanism in order for us to be skinny and meet a certain aesthetic. And that's what a lot of people in my personal life, in my professional experience, in my academic experience, a lot of times this is what people will come to you, and that's their mindset. So in order for us to help them nutritionally, we have to be able to help them with their mindset as well. And coming into a diet like something like this, a lot of times, which is what this last article talks about, it's not that simple. It's because there are all kinds of external factors to consider: sociocultural factors, political factors, environmental factors. There are religious preferences. There are allergies and diseases, and access is one of the biggest obstacles to overcome. So when we're talking about this, we can't just say, yep, the Blue Zone's diet and leave it, because it doesn't paint an entire picture or the entire benefit of what's going on. So we talked about the claim already a little bit: live to 100, the secrets of the Blue Zones. It's all about that longevity. And it's cool to think like that, sure. However, we miss the journey. And that's one reason I actually really liked watching this documentary, is that it shows us a little bit of the journey, but still with that focus of, I want to live forever, like that I don't know, it's just this grandiose idea that humans have, of that if we can just achieve this one thing, we'll be healthy. If we can achieve, what are you doing on the way to get there? And what we're doing on the way to get there is one reason I really like the Blue Zone's focus. Check out the Blue Zone's website. And the documentary and all of his books. I wouldn't rely on social media and Pinterest and things like that for actual Blue Zones information, unless, of course, it looks like they just screenshot it from the website, because their website provides information like this. So, Okinawa, Japan. There's a focus on being dedicated to family and friends, so like that being loved and part of a community. And then what I think is particularly cool is that the women outlive men in Okinawa so much that it is highlighted in this map, which to me says that's another thing to explore. What's the difference for different genders? What's the difference in different societies? Because if we are trying to use nutrition and mental health to help people feel better overall, I think exploring what the experience is just as important as looking at what the evidence of the nutritional studies say. Like in Greece, napping. It's literally the first thing listed. Occasional fasting, drinking goat's milk. So right here we see that taking naps, it's obviously beneficial, right? And then adding things and taking things out as we need to. It's not a rule. It's a suggestion. It's a guideline. Please tell me every time I say the word guideline, you think of Pirates of the Caribbean as well. Sardinia, Italy, wine and laughter. The emphasis here is not the wine. The emphasis is the laughter. Wine is just a perk, right? And this is actually where men live the longest. So what's the difference in the areas? Is it happenstance? Are they directly correlated, or are they completely separate? So already we've seen napping, family time, friend time, being loved, being part of a community, that kind of thing. And having but that being reciprocal, not you over dedicating yourself or someone pandering to you or catering to you. It's a reciprocal thing. And then in Costa Rica, the natural water sources that have calcium and magnesium and all of these really beneficial minerals that help not only our bones, our musculoskeletal system, but those things can actually be beneficial to our hormones. They are beneficial to our cardiovascular health. They are beneficial to our mental health, emotional health, psychological health, however you feel like labeling it, whatever label you feel like works best for you. Because I feel like a lot of times we get wrapped up in these labels, and that prevents us from moving forward with things like this. And I feel like Loma Linda, California is kind of a good landing spot for to kind of highlight our experience with this, right? So their focus is stress reducing, healthy diet practices. It's more of a modern emergence of this kind of mentality. And I think that is important. And I also think that it's important because we're shifting in the right direction. It's also important to understand that if there are deeply rooted cultural values, let's just say in Japan, those are going to be very, very different from a fairly new community in Loma Linda, California. And you can use that, excuse me again, that general premise to talk about the other areas. And Singapore has actually been on the world's list of emerging healthy countries because of all of the socio-political, medical, public health type movements that they have going on. And as you can see on this slide here, and we'll talk about each area a little bit individually, but look at the breakdown. There's some similarities, there's definite overlap, but if you look at the breakdown, no area is the same. And what I think is cool is that so far here in the US, we've been able to basically implement or create blue zones through the Blue Zone Project in Texas, Iowa, Minnesota, and another location in California. And this little guy over here, the Blue Zones Principles, let's see. It keeps scrolling and it outlines absolutely everything. This is all on their website. You can find it on their website. I just wanted to kind of show a little snippet of it. And I think it's really cool that we're essentially creating these areas, creating these zones where they don't naturally exist anymore. Because at one point, there's a good chance that there would have been more of these blue zones around the world before industrialization, before capitalism, before all of these things came in and really, really altered the environment in which we exist. And I think it's important that when we do things like the Blue Zones Project and try to create things in small communities, I think it's really important that we're doing things like that, because if you create, let's say you create a Blue Zones area in your kitchen and it's just for you, but then you go out to eat with your friends, you go out and do things, and you go out into the community and they don't have that same mentality, it's a little different. It's a little more difficult, right? And that's okay. And what I think is really cool is that we can essentially create these in our own homes, in our own spaces, within our families, and it slowly starts to build. And again, these little pie charts are showing us how much variation there is. Like, look at all the yellow in Japan, and there's hardly any yellow. Actually, Greece and Japan, there's a lot of yellow, and then a moderate amount in Loma Linda, and then Italy and Costa Rica. It's there. That's not the main focus, and that's okay, because what we're doing here is we're not looking at specific nutrient calculations. We're not looking at, well, these people live for this long, which means we have to do exactly what they do, and that means it's going to work for everybody. And it's not this cut and dry thing, and it's not this all or nothing thing that we oftentimes get like sucked into. And then when we fail, we feel really bad about ourselves. And I feel like the model for this really sets people up for a little bit more success than, I approaching or coming into something feeling like you're already going to fail because there are too many rules, or waking up in the middle of the night and being like, nope, forget it, I need a piece of cake, I'm eating a piece of cake, I give up, I quit, because there are so many restrictions and so many rules that don't fit with you in your current environment, in your current lifestyle, and your current health and well-being needs. And this model, having so much ambiguity in what is allowed, and not even having things that are allowed, but having a category of just whole foods that are allowed without having to create a list, right? And the things that aren't allowed, they're not even really restricted to you. It's a suggestion to not use them, because not everyone has the same access to things. Not everyone has the same cultural experience with things. Not everyone has the same ability to digest things. There are so many different individual factors and community factors that go into it, that leaving it open actually creates this really beautiful space for people to embrace what their individual needs are, embrace what they need emotionally, embrace what they need physically, embrace what they need culturally, environmentally. And then with us being humans, what I see in these blue zone areas is that strong sense of community. And evolutionary medicine actually talks about community a lot. And the food in this actually is addressed in evolutionary medicine quite a bit as well, because the world that we live in is vastly different than the world that our ancestors lived in. And when I say ancestors, I'm talking about like from the beginning of modern humans, like 6,000+ years, right? And it just, recreating a natural environment in areas in which that has been taken away, I think is a beautiful thing. And if you start in your home, in your life, with something similar to this, whatever works for you, this is just something that I think has the potential to fit with most people. When you start to put value on your food more than, is it good, is it bad, how much weight is it going to make me gain, does it fit into my diet, when you start to embrace cultural foods, and when you start to embrace cultural interactions and sharing foods with people and understanding that it is a natural component of life, I think the blue zones premise has, it opens so many doors for so many people to be themselves and feel good about working on feeling good. Because when you feel bad about feeling good, you don't actually feel good. So conclusions are just the beginning. For me, I think it's just the beginning. And I've kind of touched on some of this already. I like to use the Greek word dieta because it's a lifestyle premise. It's not a diet. It's not restrictive. And I feel like the blue zones kind of mimics that. And when someone else has already outlined something that you believe in, it's really easy to just go, oh, let's see what else they have to say, and sink into it and just play around. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, check out their website, because when you start to feel good about feeling good, that feeling gets stuck in your brain, and your brain goes, oh, I can use these pathways. Let's try it. and then it keeps going and it keeps getting better, and you reuse those pathways over and over again, and all of a sudden you're in this lifestyle that just makes sense for you. And this includes the different dimensions of health, and there are currently 9 recognized ones. I think there should be a 10th, working on it. But the reason we have to divide them into these areas, these different dimensions, is because we've been pulled so far away from our health and well-being being part of just naturally occurring in our lives and who we are. And I think a lot of it comes down to our relationship with food, our nutritional necessities, and then our cultural experience, which we've already talked about. And I think there's so much to be discovered when we take a step back from all the hoopla. We take a step back from all the trends and all the fads and all the restrictions, and we actually learn about our bodies. We learn about the food that we eat, our relationships with it, and how that plays into our health and well-being emotionally, mentally, physically, psychologically, and then moving out into our communities, our environments, and into our jobs, and into our spiritual practices, and all of these other things, and our relationships, whatever the dynamic is. There's so much that we can learn from these blue zones, and I'm going to do a video on each individual one, so that way we can break things down just a little bit. But there's your there's your overall kind of idea. I think giving ourselves a little bit of space to exist as individuals, instead of just like the influencer that we follow, or just like our next door neighbor, or just like that person that's way too intense at the gym. I think giving ourselves, or that doctor that shames you for whatever they shame you for, because that happens a lot, unfortunately. And I think creating space for us to feel good about being ourselves, and understanding that each person's individual nutritional and health needs are different. I feel like the blue zones is kind of an area that you can start to take ideas and premises and concepts from, and start to apply those in your life little by little, until you've kind of created your own little blue zone that you can exist in, and then share that with other people in ways that it's going to benefit them, because it's going to be different than how it benefits you. So I know that's a really long video, but I'm really glad that there are platforms that we can start to talk about these kind of things a little bit more, because there's a lot of crap information out there. So stay tuned. We're going to do a video on each of the different zones, and it will not be this. They each will not be this long, I promise. This is the bulk of the information. The rest of it's just kind of fun. So let's start feeling good about feeling good.
我刚入新加坡，降落在新加坡，你们在新加坡的剧场一抓 Pokemon。我刚入新加坡，降落在新加坡，你们在新加坡的剧场一抓 Pokemon。我起床就要去完美，他们必须给我高调排面，口碑并非卡也不是看也没有差别，都特别让人怀念。某个 center 的昂迪昂个黑光动眼，超多同好咖，一帮爱黑咖。